This is the Crimson Corner with Bill Riley.
Walks it into the end zone for a Utah touchdown.
Your source for the best insight on everything happening in and around Utah athletics. Now, here's the host of the Crimson Corner, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of the Crimson Corner podcast. I'm the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley. Great to have you on board for this week's episode. Got a great show lined up for you today. We'll tell you all about that coming up in just a couple of minutes. Show is always being presented by our friends at Advanced Window Products, the #1 window company in the state of Utah. It just happens to be owned and operated by the former mayor of Sac Lake City, one Nate Orchard. So if you're in the market for new windows, or maybe you need to replace some windows in your home, or you're building a new home, give our friends at Advanced Window Products a ring, and they can help you and get you taken care of. Today's pod, we're going to talk a little spring football week 3, my latest position group breakdown. We'll take a look at the tight ends. Then I've got a question for you guys to think about just a little bit. I'm going to give you my top 5 tight ends in Utah football history. It's been a position in recent years. It's got a lot of run, but there's been some really good tight ends down through the years at Utah. We're going to talk about that. Then I want your feedback. By the way, I always want your feedback on this podcast. If you have a comment, if you have a question, if you want to respond to something I said, if you have a suggestion for a guest or for me, anything you want to send, I love to interact with you. I'll read some of them on the pod the following week. Just drop me an email, briley@huntsman.utah.edu. That's briley@huntsman.utah.edu. And I'll read your comments, your questions, your responses on the air in the last segment of the podcast. So we'll do that each and every week. Again, just drop me a line and we'll get that taken care of. Got another way too early top 25 for college football to look at. We've got a special guest coming up on the program today. He's a Utah legend in football, and he's now back on the staff again, but not as an assistant coach. We'll tell you about Bo Nagahi's new journey with Utah football coming up in a bit. Then we'll take a little stock of Big 12 college basketball now that the season's over, from Utah to the rest of the Big 12. And, of course, as we speak, the transfer portal is open and in full effect for college basketball. And dare I say, perhaps even out of control already on day number 2. So we'll talk about that and some odds and ends from around athletics as well on this week's edition of the Crimson Corner. All right, we're going to start with a little spring football. We're in week 3 at the University of Utah for spring football. Everything going swimmingly so far. Again, as I've been saying for a couple of weeks, it's just kind of a get-to-know-you time right now in the spring. All the new coaches and all the new folks on staff getting to know the players, and a fair number of new faces on this football team as well, getting to know the coach, especially on the offensive side where they're installing a new offensive system, coaches learning roles, players learning roles. It's been good. All the vibes are still great. The energy's been great around Utah football all spring long. I've said it every time I come into this building, and we record this podcast every week in the football building, and there's just a really good vibe and good energy in this building around Utah football. And so that's continued as we're in week 3 here at the U for Morgan Scalley's guys being out on the field. I've been doing kind of different position group breakdowns kind of throughout the offseason and looking at different areas. This week, I thought we'd talk a little bit about tight ends. This is a position that had kind of come back to prominence here at the University of Utah 6 or 7 years ago, when Andy Ludwig returned as offensive coordinator at the University of Utah. Andy was a big proponent of 2 tight end and 3 tight end set. They call it 12 and 13 personnel. And Utah got a real reputation both around the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and nationally as a real tight end university. You know, they produced a number of really good tight ends in recent years. Cole Fotheringham, Brant Keithy, Dalton Kincaid, most recently Dallin Bentley. They've produced a number of guys who are playing in the NFL right now, who have had NFL careers, who were terrific players here. It's going to be interesting looking at the room this year because there's not a lot of, shall we say, returning production in the tight end room for the University of Utah. New coach, Luke Wells, brother of Matt Wells, the former Utah State head football coach. Luke was on his staff up there, most recently at Kansas State, so he knows this conference very well and has been coaching tight ends. The only real production when it comes to production, like pass-catching number production, coming back in the tight end room is Hunter Andrews. Now, Hunter only had limited production last year, and he wasn't strictly a tight end. He was what you would call an offensive weapon. He lined up at tight end. He lined up at the backfield. He was an H-back. He did a lot of different things. And then he got hurt 4 games into the season and was out the rest of the season. I will say this. I was really getting excited last year about Hunter Andrews and using him as a weapon. He's listed as a tight end, so we talk about him as a tight end, but he's a guy that could do a bunch of different things. To me, if we're looking for a comp on Hunter Andrews, and I'm not saying he's this guy yet, but he's got the same type background and body type of Brant Kuithe. Brant Kuithe was an uber. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. It wasn't like Kuithe played 47 years ago. He was here 2 years ago. But Brant was an uber successful tight end. But remember, coming out of high school in Texas, by the way, same general area that Hunter Andrews grew up in Texas, Brant Kuithe was a running back, and he moved to tight end at Utah. Well, guess what Hunter Andrews was in high school? He was a running back. He came to Utah as a line. They recruited him to come here as a linebacker. Well, they moved him back to the offensive side of the football. I think he's a guy that could have a really nice, productive year if he stays healthy. But he's the only real guy in that tight end room that comes back with any real production at Utah. Then you've got the 2 big returning bodies, Sione Matuapaka and Semi Taulonga. They're called the Rhino backs. These guys are basically offensive linemen who are lined up at tight end. When Utah is in short yardage and they need to pick up and they need some bulk, they bring out the Rhino package. These are the big guys. You saw both those guys, Sione and Semi, last year, and you're going to see them probably again this year as big body tight ends in the Rhino package. And that's about it from last year. Now, we've got some new faces from other places that have some production. First and foremost, a guy that began his career at Utah, an Olympus High School guy, who then went to Weber State and was second-team All-Big Sky a year ago, Noah Benny, the brother of Jackson Benny. Well, Noah's back. He's got a year to play, wanted to come back. He was very productive up at Weber State, and so he'll join his brother Jackson back here at Utah. And then Will Money, not the character from The Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's character, but Will Money, who is also a Utah product. He began his career at Utah State, then he went to Oklahoma State, and now he's back here. He's got limited production in his time as well. Didn't do a lot last year. Played at Oklahoma State, but didn't have big numbers. So those are a couple of new faces from other places that might be familiar names to people in the state of Utah. Then you've got a newcomer with a little bit of hype, a guy by the name of, well, he's got a great name, Bear Fisher. He comes from Queen Creek, Arizona. He was a 3-star tight end. By the way, same general area that Trey Reynolds is from, I believe. I think Trey's from that Queen Creek area as well. Bear Fisher's a freshman. What his role will be, I don't know yet, but he was a highly touted guy coming out of high school. And in a room that doesn't have a lot of production coming back, maybe he's a guy that could carve out a niche for himself. And then you've got a guy that's a new face or a familiar face in a new position. Kenai Lopes. He was a linebacker here, a 3-star linebacker. But the linebacker room's pretty full, and they played him there last year a little bit and liked what they saw. So Kenai Lopes now leaves the defensive side of the football to move to the offensive side of the football. By the way, that's a reversal from the old era of Utah football where everybody would move from offense to defense. Now he's moving from defense to offense. Anyway, that's kind of a look at the Utah tight end room. I don't know how many answers we get out of it this spring, but they've got a lot of bodies. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Kevin McGivern and Luke Wells implement those tight ends in this new offensive system. Again, not a lot of production to talk about, but a lot of potential in that room. Which brings me to my question of the pod for you guys, and I would love to hear from you. Shoot me an email, briley@huntsman.utah.edu. Since we're talking about the tight end position group on this week's podcast and this week's spring football look, I thought we'd rank my ranking of the top 5 tight ends in Utah football history. There have been a lot of really good tight ends down through the years, and not just in recent memory. If you go back in time, because we're talking about history now, Utah's had some good tight ends. So I'm going to give you my top 5 up to 1. And then I'd love to hear from you. You don't have to give me a top 5. If you want to give me your favorite or the best or a favorite tight end memory, shoot me an email, briley@huntsman.utah.edu. Number 5 on my list of the top 5 tight ends in Utah football history is Marv Fleming. You may say, Marv Fleming, who's that, Bill? Well, you got to be old to know who Marv Fleming is, or just somebody that loves Utah football. Marv played in the 60s. He played in the early 60s. Marv was a first-team All-Skyline Conference tight end. Marv played in an era where they didn't throw the football a lot. So you're going to look at the record books and say, Marv Fleming's numbers were pretty pedestrian. Yeah, they may have been, but Marv Fleming was a talent. The game was different back then. Just all you need to know is Marv Fleming won 4 Super Bowls with the Green Bay Packers. The Packers drafted him, and he had a great NFL career with Vince Lombardi and Bart Starr and everybody in Green Bay. So Marv Fleming would be my number 5 tight end in Utah football history. My number 4 tight end in Utah football history, a Utah native, a guy that played in the early to mid-90s, put up really nice numbers. He was a second-team all-WAC tight end. His name is Henry Lusk. Henry Lusk was one of those guys that was, again, as the tight end position was starting to evolve just a little bit, kind of beginning to make a little bit of a name for himself in the Ron McBride era. So Henry Lusk will be number 4 on my list. Number 3 on my list, a guy that was a Scott Mitchell favorite to target. He was a first-team all-WAC performer and a second-team all-WAC performer. For the longest time, he held receiving records at the University of Utah. He was a fantastic player who went on to have a great NFL career as well. And by the way, I'm basing this list solely on their Utah career, not what they went on to do on the NFL level, just what they did at Utah. But Dennis Smith is my number 3 tight end in Utah football history. He was part of kind of that tight end revolution where tight ends became a real part of the offense, catching the football. One season he had 73 catches and was an all-WAC player. Here's where it becomes tough, and we're going to get into a little bit more modern history here. This is going to be me a little bit more about the overall skill set than maybe just simply numbers, because to me, it can't all just be about numbers. My number 2 tight end in Utah football history, Brant Kuithe. Brant Kuithe was a 3-time second-team All-Pac-12 tight end and a first-team All-Big 12 tight end, despite only playing 9 games in his 1 year in the Big 12. Kuithe was a favorite target. He goes back to the Tyler Huntley era, all the way to the Cam Rising to the Bryson Barnes era. He played with 3 different Utah quarterbacks. And when he was healthy, Brant Kuithe might have been number 1 on this list and might be playing in the NFL today, except his body just simply failed him. Brant was one of those guys that when he played, he was so productive. He was uber productive. You can and Andy Ludwig loved to use him on who was using tight ends on fly sweeps? Brant Kuithe was. He was a target. He was a mismatch for safeties and linebackers because he was great catch and then run. Probably comes from his background as a running back. He was great in the open field. His hands were terrific as well. The only downside to Brant Kuithe was injuries caught him so many different times. But he is my number 2 tight end in Utah football history. And my number 1 tight end in Utah football history is Dalton Kincaid. He was a first-team All-Pac-12 tight end in 2022, one of those great years for Utah football, a third-team All-American. He didn't have the numbers career-wise that Kuithe and Dennis Smith had. But if you watch Dalton Kincaid play, remember, he played his first 2 years of college football at the 1AA level for the University of San Diego. He was a lightly recruited kid coming out of Lutheran High School in Las Vegas. But Freddie Whittingham and the Utah staff found him and brought him here and turned him into one of the most productive tight ends in college football for the last 2 years of his college football career. And anybody that watched the USC game in 2022 knows exactly what I'm talking about. He was unstoppable. He had 16 targets, and he had 16 receptions. Folks, he was 16 for 16 against the USC defense. He had 234 yards and a touchdown in that game. He single-handedly, along with Cam Rising, willed Utah to a victory. If you remember that day, he made some catches. The one on the sideline where they initially ruled him out of bounds and he got his toe down. He had a catch against Colorado in the back of the end zone where he ultimately got hurt on, which ended up eventually ending his season. Dalton Kincaid was unbelievable. Now he's thriving with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, but this has nothing to do with his pro career where he was drafted. Dalton Kincaid, pound for pound, position for position for me, was the best tight end in Utah football history. So I go Fleming 5, Lusk 4, Smith 3, Keithy 2, and Dalton Kincaid number 1 on my top 5 tight ends in Utah football history. You can agree or you can disagree, and you could give me your 2 cents worth. Shoot me an email. I'll read them next week. Give me your thoughts on the top tight ends in Utah football history. briley@huntsman.utah.edu. All right, before we break and bring our special guest on, I found another way too early top 25. This time it's from the Bleacher Report. I was scanning and scouring. We'll probably have another round of these coming out, by the way, after spring ball ends. It won't be way too early then. It'll just be a too early. They'll drop the way. It'll just be a too early. But everybody will get a new feel after spring football and what the rosters look like and how everybody looks in spring. But this Bleacher Report, way too early top 25, had Utah come in at number 17, which, again, as I have told you all throughout this offseason, that's the feels about right zone for Utah football. Anywhere in that 15 to 20 range, I think that's about where Utah belongs. They had 4 Big 12 teams in the top 25. They had Utah, obviously, at number 17. Texas Tech was at number 8. BYU was at number 11. And Houston was at number 20. As I've said before, I feel like a broken record every time I do one of these things. 8 feels a touch high for Tech. 11 feels just a touch high for BYU. Like I said, Utah in that 15 to 17, 15 to 20 range feels good. 20 feels about right for Houston. I think they're in that 20 to 25 range. The only thing I've said all along, I think Arizona is going to be pretty good. I think they deserve somewhere in that 20 to 25 range too. But this is Bleacher Reports. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what, if anything, changes after spring ball with some of these top 25s in the preseason. So, again, if you want to comment on that, you can do that as well. Tell me where you think Utah and some of these other Big 12s belong by shooting me an email to briley@huntsman.utah.edu. That's briley@huntsman.utah.edu. All right, we're going to keep the conversation going coming up next. A good friend of mine, a guy that worked with me on the broadcast for 5-6 years. He's now got a new role with Utah football, and, of course, he's one of the great defensive backs in Utah football history. Bo Nagahi joins us next on Crimson Corner.
Here's another insider interview on the Crimson Corner podcast.
Really excited here on Crimson Corner today to have an old friend, a work colleague, and a Utah legend join us here. He's come back full circle in his career from his playing days to now his new role with Utah football. He's Director of Alumni Relations. He used to be on the broadcast with me. I think it was 5, maybe 6 seasons with me on the sideline. Those of us that know him well refer to him as the Persian Prince. But those of you out there may just know him as Bo Nagahi, Utah great from the early 2000s, now Director of Alumni Relations here at the University of Utah and part of Morgan Scalley's football staff. Bo.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Bill. It's so good to be here with you.
Is it weird for you? We record this podcast inside the football building in the football studio. Is it weird? Is it settled back that you're kind of back now after playing here 20-plus years ago in a new role with Utah football?
It is. It's weird. However, it wasn't like this. It didn't look like this. It wasn't this building. And so for me to be able to come to work to the football facility every day it's still really exciting for me. Every morning I wake up, I'm like, there's no way I get to do this for a living. And I feel extremely, fortunate to be in this position.
So how did it come about? Obviously, you and Morgan Scalley have been friends for a long time. You were teammates for many years here. He takes over as head coach. How does this connection happen job-wise?
Yeah, he, like you said, we stayed in contact throughout the years. We were always texting. We would see each other every once in a while. And when the transition happened, he gave me a call and he said, Bo, is this something you'd be interested in? In the past years, he would entertain, we would have a conversation and he would entertain the idea of this, is this something that you would want to do? Is this something that you can do? And so we've had conversations throughout the years, but it was never, serious to the point where it was just a few months ago. And when he asked me, I slept on it, but I already knew what the answer was going to be.
He's a hard guy to say no to.
Yeah,
I've gotten this kind of same sense with some of the assistant coaches, Jordan Gross, Luke Wells, Kevin McGivern, some of the guys. Colton Swan was obviously already on staff, but he wasn't defensive coordinator. When I've talked to these guys, they said, the phone call that I had with Morgan, he was very convincing.
Mm-hmm. He is. He's so good. I'm so impressed by Coach Scalley, to be honest with you. Like you said, we played together. We've had a long relationship. I've always been impressed by Morgan. In this role, though, I didn't, I just watching him and observing from the minute that I got into the building, I'm just so happy for him. And I feel so strongly that he's in the position that he should be in.
We'll get back to some of that stuff and some of your observations being on staff now about that. Director of Alumni Relations. What does this job entail? I know Utah, for years and the years I've been around the program, have always tried to be welcoming to alumni coming back. This position, though, kind of feels like you guys are trying to take that relationship and that partnership and that long-time standing with the alumni who are the backbone of this program to a new level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Having the perspective of an alumni outside and seeing, what I really enjoyed or what was great and what wasn't. We're trying to fill those holes. Coach Scalley obviously realized this is a program that we need to have here at the University of Utah, as well as Mark Harlan in the academic department. Athletic department. They have supported me through and through, and they feel like it's really important too. So it's not necessarily just about events or come back or be around the program. There's a lot to it, Bill. This brotherhood will never expire, right? And me as a player, I do remember when I was done playing football. You're done with the structure, you're done with the organization of everything, and then your identity. You lose your identity. What do you have? I had a degree in my hand, and I'm from Utah. My parents are here. My support system is here. My friends were here. I still felt lost. And so I don't want the players who are graduating to feel that anymore. And so that's just one stem of this tree that we're trying to build is how can we direct? How can we help the players? Networking, obviously. I mean, we have Utes from coast to coast and Utes that have played back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. It's all encompassing. And you think of mentorship, like I said, career leads, degree completion. That's another big thing that we want to be able to help these players if for whatever reason they left without finishing their degree, the ability to come back and finish. And this institution is in support of that as well.
So this isn't just you connecting the alumni that have gone back to the program again. This is you connecting players maybe that are on their way out of the program, graduating, moving on, to alumni that are out there in the real world.
Exactly. This is everything, right? And it's a lot. It's when I first approached this to think, okay, what am I going to build? How are we going to build this? What's meaningful? What can we build that the alum will be proud of? It's a big task, right? And I had to take a step back to say, okay, we got to take this step by step. Obviously, with all of the resources around us that we can utilize is incredible. But like I said, meaningful, Bill, things like mental health, substance abuse, every which way that you can think that we can help. When you graduate as a football player from the University of Utah, like I said, that brotherhood never expires. You're actually gaining a seat at the table, at the Utah football alumni table. And we want it to be something substantial that we can help. We can help out and we can be there for, these former players to either connect with one another or, catapult into a career that they're looking for, find something that they're interested in, just to be there to help, because they have put so much of their lives into this program.
We've got a lot of reach with this podcast. There might be former players out there that are listening to this podcast that haven't connected with the program in years, or there might be former players or alumni or staff that are listening to this that say, well, I'd love to connect and help these kids out. What's the best way to get a hold of you? Is it your email? Is there a way for somebody listening that is not maybe connected as well as they want to be or connected at all right now to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. That was my number one objective getting into this position, is creating a comprehensive database of contact information. If I can't communicate with anybody, this is not going to happen, right? And so please reach out to me, whether it's my cell phone or my email address. I don't know if you'd like me to.
Don't give your cell phone out. We won't do that, because there may be people out there that were maybe former Olympus Titans or BYU Cougar fans that might want to get a hold of you and give you a hard time. Give the email address out, though.
Yeah, the email address is bnagahi@huntsman.utah.edu.
Nagahi at huntsman.utah.edu is the best way to get a hold of Bo. And, again, if you're a former player, former staff member, and you just want to connect, or you just want to figure out a way that you can become involved with the program again, that's exactly what Bo's doing with this new role as Director of Alumni Relations. All right, let's go back in time for just a minute. What's your earliest memory of Morgan Scalley as a teammate when you were here at the University of Utah?
There's a lot of memories there.
What do you remember about the first time you met him at practice or in an off-season conditioning program, whatever it was?
Well, yeah, he first came in as a running back, and just knowing about Morgan Scalley before I even got here, right? Playing football in the state, everybody knew who Morgan Scalley was. He was such a wonderful player and Mr. Football coming out of Highland. But when I was able to become a teammate with him, like I said, I've always been impressed by Morgan Scalley, just the way he does things, the person that he is. One thing that I love most, Bill, is here today, he's the same guy that he was in the locker room 21 years ago, right? He has the same heart, the same attention to detail, the work ethic, all of that. And it was just such a pleasure to play with a guy like that. I mean, obviously, if he wasn't in the post, then that was a different story, because a lot of the times we relied on him. But no, he was a guy that was always even coaching me up at times, being on the field with him at the same time. Like I said, I was really lucky to have a guy like that who was a support system as well as just a really, really good friend.
Did you have an idea when you guys were playing together, you were teammates, when he's coaching you up a little bit, or you guys are out there playing together in that secondary for first Kyle Whittingham? Well, it was really for Kyle Whittingham because he was your defensive coordinator all the way through. Did you have an idea he might be a coach someday? Could you have projected 21, 22 years forward and said, this guy might be a head coach someday?
I did. I remember telling him. He doesn't remember so much when I bring it up, but I remember telling him or asking him on the field. It was after a summer scrimmage, our senior year. I was like, you're going to be a head coach here one day, aren't you? And he was like, well, what are you talking about? And I was like, if you just look back at your history, your dad played here, you've been a Utah fan your whole life. You're so intelligent when it comes to the game of football and everything else. But, yeah, you're going to be a head coach. And he kind of like shook it off and was like, you're crazy, man. What are you talking about? But I did. I knew. And I'm going to hold on. I'm going to stick to that. Absolutely, I told him that.
What's his greatest trait as a coach that he maybe took as a player and be brought to a coach? What do you see now? Now, you were his teammate. You've observed him over the years as an assistant, but now you're working on staff. You've been with him for 4.5, almost 5 months now, which is weird. Time flies. So fast. Well, what do you think the greatest trait he has right now as a head coach?
Man, it's hard to pinpoint just one. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is that he cares. He truly cares about his players. He cares about his staff. He cares about everybody in the program and is not shy to let you know about it, right? He doesn't have to say that he does, but just by his actions alone. Number two, the way that he approaches the game, how smart he is, attention to detail, right? It's not really just about X's and O's anymore, Bill. I mean, once you're in the building, once you're in these meetings and you see how they break the game down, the sport, the kids, the psychology of it, the physicalness of it, there's a lot.
How much different is it from when you played?
Oh my goodness!
I mean, just the behind the scenes stuff versus when. I mean, you only played. Again, I'm not meaning to age Bo here, but 22 years ago now. But how much different is the whole? The game on the field mostly the same, but everything else
so different. It's every day that I've been here where I sit there shocked, thinking, "Wow, this stuff." I mean, the resources are incredible. Nutrition, strength and conditioning. We have a sports, scientist on staff. Just the approach by the coaches to think, workload, how important that is. It's a science. It truly is. I don't think that's how it was when we played because I just feel like it was grind. It doesn't matter how many practices you had or what, how long they were, but the way they approach and break down every single activity, and it blows me away.
I want to go back in time for just a minute and walk down memory lane with Bo Nagahi. Mm-hmm. You were a Ron McBride guy first.
Yes, sir.
You were brought here by Coach Mack. You played for Coach Mack. Mm-hmm. But then Mack got let go, and Urban Meyer came in. Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty fair to say that you're an Urban guy. Mm-hmm. You're one of the guys on the short list when he mentions his favorite players at Utah. He mentions John Madsen. He mentions Morgan Scalley. He mentions Alex Smith. But he mentions Bo Nagahi too. So you were an Urban guy. You were part of the changing of the culture. You were one of his guys. What was that transition time like in that time that Urban came in and was changing everything? Because you were one of the guys.
It was the culture that changed. I think that's the number one thing that is so hard to really accept, right? You knew it one way, and then overnight it's a different way. And I think Coach Meyer, I think he liked me or likes me because I was one of the guys that bought in, right? I was the guy who was like, okay, whatever you need us to do, let's do it. And I was trying to bring everybody along with me. It was also very rough, Bill. It was a very tough time. I've never been pushed physically and mentally ever in my life. And at the time, there was never a time where I felt like I can't get. Actually, well, I might take that back. There were times where I was like, "Are we going to survive this?" Right? But looking back, I mean, that is why we are who we are today. That's what really. It's basically the foundation for a lot of us as players moving forward in our careers and in our family lives to be able to say, like, this is really not that hard because I've been through a lot worse. But the first year was really tough, Bill. When Meyer first came in and he was incredibly militant and he was changing the culture and it had to be a certain way, a lot of people didn't buy in. Those who did, it was hard. But then that second year, I mean, you get to the season, you start winning games. You're like, okay, this really works. This is the reason why we've been working so hard. And then that second year, I would say he kind of turned it down a few notches. It was still the expectation was incredibly high, but you now have an understanding, right? I mean, that second year is always easier than the first year. So.
How much did you guys, the guys that bought in early, and I think you were an early buying guy, how much did you guys have to help change the minds of other players? Because coaches can't do that by themselves. No. It has to be a handful of guys that helps do it. Was it tough?
It was very tough, yeah, because like I said, there was a lot of resistance at the time. And obviously I didn't do it by myself. You named a few guys. Morgan Scalley was one of those.
Yeah.
And, on both sides of the ball, you have to rely on the guy next to you. And I think that was one of the main messages, that you can't do it alone. This is not an individual sport, right? And if you want to win, you have to be able to rely and trust the guy next to you. So it was all about culture, and we did everything that we could do to really bring that in. And it wasn't just what happened in the weight room or what happened on the field. The X factor is what happens off of the field and how close that team is.
I asked Alex this about a year and a half ago when I interviewed him for his Ring of Honor ceremony. I'll ask you, when did you know going into the 2004 season you guys were that good? Did you know before the season, or did you know early in the season?
I knew before the season.
You knew you guys were going to be that kind of good?
I did, because, that first season we lost 2 games. But the way we handled the games, the way we approached it, the coaches, how creative they were with the scheme, but just the pure will to beat that individual across the line from you. That was one of the factors that Coach Meyer did such a good job psychologically in all the players, is that he broke you down, but he built you back up. And he didn't build you into a human, he built you into a machine. And so you were so confident, you respected the person across the line, but you were confident and you knew that there was no way that they were going to beat you. And so going into that first game, Texas A&M came into our house, and we slaughtered them, and they had no chance. And it was like that every other game after that. And it was such a fun time to look back. But, that hard work, we never let down. We worked hard every single week.
It kind of felt like at times during that season that you guys were toying with teams, that you knew going into a game you were going to beat them. It was just a matter of how, offensively, even special teams. I remember a game where you and Morgan are back. You guys ran the reverse on the kickoff, I think.
Yeah.
Did you flip it to him, or did he flip it to you?
I flipped it to him.
I think it was UNLV, wasn't it?
It was UNLV. It was a home game. It was raining. They would put plays into the scheme like that every week, and the way that we would prepare, we knew that when it was time to actually make it happen, there was no question, right? You would make it happen. And I remember vividly going out. They called the play. And what we were coached was, if I was 5 yards or beyond into the end zone, you kneel it down. Well, I looked at Scalley as we were jogging to the end zone before they kicked it, and I was like, listen, I'm bringing this out. I don't care how deep it is. I'm bringing this out. Be ready. He was like, I got you. And so I think I was on the 9-yard line. Like, my back foot was almost out of bounds of the end zone.
Oh, you were 9 yards deep.
No, 9 yards deep. Excuse me. And never a question. So that speaks to the confidence that, listen, we knew all 11 guys on that field were going to do their job. I mean, and it showed. It showed.
That's why he used to, on the sidelines, when the kick would be kickoff, sometimes you would hear on the broadcast, sometimes you wouldn't. Bring it out!
Yeah, exactly.
Because that was Bo Nagahi's mindset, just bring it out.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was hard-nosed football, right? And I see a lot of what I experienced during my time playing now with Coach Scalley. Culture is huge for Coach Scalley, and it takes a lot of time. It's tough to implement. It's tough for people to accept and start to believe it. But the way he's doing it, yeah.
That's what I want to end with right here, because I know your time is valuable as Director of Alumni Relations, and I don't want to take too much of it. What has you most excited about this season coming up? I've told a lot of people that I've talked to around the conference when I've traveled for basketball, it's going to be a good team this year.
This is going to be a good
It's going to be good. But what has you most excited about the season coming up?
The dynamic between the coaches and what happens inside in the office is exceptional. And then the talent on the field, the way that these kids are accepting the new culture, the change, that's hard. That's tough, right? It's not very easy when a head coach leaves, but I think they've really adapted incredibly well. But it's when it all comes together, it's going to be exciting. And people, get your popcorn, get ready.
If you guys know of alumni or are an alumni or a former staff member and want to reach out and interact with the program, be part of the program in some way, shape, or form, reach out to Bo. It's B Nagahi, Naghi. Is that right? Nagahi at huntsman.utah.edu. Good to see you, Persian Prince.
Thank you. I appreciate you putting it out there, and please reach out. My number one, like I said, objective is connection here. So let's connect.
There you go. Bo Nagahi with us here on Crimson Corner.
The best insight on all things Utah athletics. It's the Crimson Corner Podcast.
Big thank you to Bo Nagahi. Congratulations. So happy for Bo in his new role as Director of Alumni Relations for Utah football, for joining us and taking a few minutes out of his day here on Crimson Corner today. Hopefully, if you're an alumni, former player, staff member, and you'd like to reach out and be part of the program, you can reach out to Bo, and he'll help you out with all that good stuff. All right, final segment on the pod. College basketball season, well, the regular season, the basketball part of the season is now over. Now the crazy season begins. We'll get to that in a minute. Congratulations to the Michigan Wolverines. They were worthy champions. Goodness gracious. The beatdown that they put on Arizona on last Saturday, I did not see coming. I thought Arizona was the best team in college basketball. Michigan proved it wrong, and then they won a dogfight against a really scrappy and talented UConn team that's got championship DNA. So the Big Ten rules the roost in college basketball this year. Big 12 had a good – I wanted to take stock. Speaking of the Big 12, I wanted to take quick stock of kind of the Big 12 hoops season now that everything is over and done. We'll start first with Utah, and then I'll just kind of run through the Big 12 because there were times this year where the Big 12 was the best conference in college basketball. But ultimately, as everybody knows, in college basketball, you're judged on the postseason. Nobody remembers November and December and January and February. All anybody remembers is March and the first week in April. That's how you're judged in college basketball, whether that's right or whether that's wrong. And so we'll start with Utah. I think everybody would admit, 10-22 and 2-16 is not the year that Utah basketball was hoping for in year one of Alex Jensen. Clearly need an influx of Big 12 talent, Big 12 level talent. And as Wes Wilcox has said, they need to be mentally and physically stronger and tougher next season. But as I've said repeatedly with Wes and others, and last week when Parker Van Dyke joined us too, I think Utah basketball is poised and better positioned and have a chance to make a real leap year one to year two just simply because the staff and the GM are in place. They got a late start on it last year. Your preparation for the offseason, recruiting in the portal doesn't begin in March or April when your season ends. It begins in December, and it's a year-long, year-round thing. The same way it is in the pros, where GMs and staffs are always looking at their roster and looking at free agents and things like that. College is like that now too. So obviously not the year Utah wanted this year, but I think they're going to be better positioned as they move into year two with Alex and Wes and their entire staff in place. So who had a good season in the Big 12 this year? Or even a great season? I think Arizona leads that list. Despite what happened in the Final Four, they made their first Final Four in 25 years, which is hard to believe for Arizona, as good as they always seem to be. It was the first time since 2001 they made the Final Four. Despite losing to Michigan, Arizona had a great year. And I think there's only two other schools in the Big 12 that would tell you they had a good or great season this year. TCU picked middle of the pack. They made the NCAA tournament. UCF picked toward the bottom of the pack. They made the NCAA tournament. I would say those three teams could stake claim to having a good or a great season. My next category for the Big 12 is you have to be a little disappointed by how the season ran and went out. I'll start first with Houston. Now, yeah, they made the Sweet 16, and the tournament's unpredictable. But this was a Houston team that got all the way to the championship game a year ago. This was a team that a lot of people thought they were picked by everybody. They got, I think it was 15 of the 16 first-place votes in the preseason poll. They lost in the Sweet 16 to Illinois. And granted, Illinois was good this year. They made the Final Four. But I think the predictions for Houston and Kelvin Sampson were to win the Big 12 and to make the Final Four. And they didn't do either one of those things this year. So I think they probably have to be a little disappointed, again, based on what their standard are. The other school, I think, would be Kansas. They despite having either the first or second best player in the upcoming draft in Darren Peterson and a ton of talent around him, It just never materialized this year for Kansas. Some of that was Peterson's unavailability. But getting bounced in the second round was not what people were talking about Kansas as a Final Four caliber team before the season. And even in the season, people thought, okay, even after the season ended, Sweet 16, Elite 8, maybe a shot at a Final Four. None of that happened. They got bounced in the second round. So I think if you're a Kansas fan, and I know quite a few, you're probably a little disappointed with this season. Then I've got the what might have been group. I think there's three schools that you'd say, well, if it weren't for, this is what might have been. I'll put Iowa State first on that list. I had them as a Final Four caliber team when the tournament began. They were good. TJ Otzelberger's team, they were well put together. They had good guard play. They had good front court play. They played hard. They guarded. They could shoot. The problem was their best player got hurt in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Was it the NCAA tournament? Yes, it was the opening round. Joshua Jefferson was a fantastic – he might have been the best, even with all the talent in the Big 12, he might have been the most important player to any team. Everything ran through Joshua Jefferson. When he rolled his ankle in the opening round, it changed everything. They got to the Elite Eight, but that was as far as they could get. So Iowa State, what might have been, because I think they might have been a Final Four team. Texas Tech, another what might have been team. They had the player of the year in the Big 12 Conference a year ago, and he was on his way to maybe being that again this year. They had excellent guard play and three-point shooting, but what they had was J.T. Toppin. He was an unstoppable force in the post. He was a double-double machine. He was like a 23-12 guy every night. But he was really all they had inside. They surrounded him with a bunch of shooters. J.T. Toppin tore his ACL about midway through the conference season, and credit Tech. And I think Grant McCaslin's a fantastic coach. But they had no inside presence. They couldn't rebound. They were reliant strictly on the three. And it derailed what might have been a potential Final Four run, Final Four team. And then the third team that kind of might have been the BYU Cougars. They had what maybe is the best player in college basketball in A.J. DeBonsa. They spent a ton of money in the transfer portal. But when they lost Richie Saunders, who was arguably the most important player to their team, he was the glue. He was kind of the heartbeat of that team. It changed everything for them. They also had a couple of injuries early in the year that nobody was talking much about until Richie Saunders got hurt. I don't know how far BYU would have gone with Saunders. They would have made a deep run. I don't know if they were a Final Four team or not. But when they lost Richie Saunders, well, we saw what happened. They got beat in the first round. So those are the what might have been teams this year in the Big 12. And now we've got some new bench bosses coming. Cincinnati fired Wes Miller after an 18-15, 9-9 season. They were just not good enough, I guess, for about the 5 years he was there. They hired Utah State's coach, Jared Calhoun, former University of Cincinnati guy. Kansas State's got a new head coach. Jerome Tang is out. He was fired in the season. A guy named Casey Alexander from Belmont is in now. K-State was not good. 12-20, 3-15. And then you've got Arizona State, Bobby Hurley out. After a 17-16 season, 7-11 in the Big 12, they hire Randy Bennett. That's a really interesting hire. Randy Bennett has been a great coach at St. Mary's for a long time. He's an Arizona native, so he's kind of coming back home. We'll see if he can kind of bring that success that he had at St. Mary's to the Big 12. So the overall verdict on the Big 12 season, you're judged on your NCAA tournament as a conference. The Big 12, for as great as they were at the top especially all year long, they got one team into the Final Four, and that team got annihilated by Michigan. They had 0 Elite 8 squads outside of Arizona. So I would say probably overall, by their standards, a little bit of a disappointing season. But injuries and a little underachieving was probably their undoing. We'll see what next year holds. As I mentioned, the next season of college basketball is underway. It's the portal season. The portal has been open for roughly 24 hours now as you listen to this podcast, and there's over 2,000 names already in the portal, which is insane. I got to say, I'm really excited to see what the offseason brings for Utah men's basketball. Now that the portal's officially open, I'm really excited to see what Alex Jensen and his staff and Wes Wilcox can now bring to this Utah program, and we'll talk about that as the offseason goes along. All right, just a couple of odds and ends before we get out of here. Utah baseball looking for a bounce-back series this coming weekend. They had a rough weekend last weekend at Kansas. Lots of offense, but not quite enough pitching. They'll go to ASU looking for a bounce-back this weekend. They're smack dab in the middle of the Big 12 standings. They're at 16-13 overall, 5-7 in the Big 12. Interesting this weekend. If you're a fan of high-level softball, it's coming to Salt Lake this weekend. Utah, who's having a good year under Amy Hogue, is hosting the top team in college softball right now. The Texas Tech Red Raiders come to Salt Lake City this weekend, 38-2, and atop the Big 12 Conference. Maybe the best team in college softball. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at Dumke Family Softball Stadium. And if you can't make it out, those games will be on ESPN+. And one other note, my good friend Kyle Kepler, the track and field coach and cross-country coach at the University of Utah, hosting the Utah Spring Classic this week. Track and field at the U on Saturday morning and early afternoon up at the McCarthy Track Complex. You can come out and watch and support if you'd like to. And come out. They don't have a lot of home meets, so you have a chance to get Utah track and field this weekend, and good luck to Kep and his crew. And once again, if you'd like to make a comment on the pod, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot me an email, briley@huntsman.utah.edu. Wherever you get this podcast, do me a favor. Rate and review us well. Give us a thumbs up or a big 5-star. Big thank you to you guys out there for listening. Big thank you to Bo Nagahi, Director of Alumni Relations for Utah Football, for walking down memory lane with us today. Nathan Thatcher, who is producing this podcast. Thank you, sir. Pride of Olympus High School and the University of Utah. And thanks to you guys as well. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Crimson Corner. Until then, I'm Bill Riley saying, go Utes.
You've been listening to the Crimson Corner podcast with Bill Riley. Bill is back next week with the latest on Utes. Download previous Crimson Corner episodes on all major podcast platforms.